Hello, Agile friends, and welcome to another episode of Agile Bytes, a podcast sponsored by Integrity Inspired Solutions, where we're building software in an agile manner day in and day out. Today, I want to talk to you about demos, specifically demos that work. Now, I do want to say this is not going to be about sprint reviews. Sprint reviews that work is going to be a future episode. And a lot of times in sprint reviews, demos are a part of them, but they are not the same thing. I'm going to be talking about the practice a little bit more generally, the demos that you might perform in sprint reviews, but also any demo that you may choose to perform, whether you do Scrum or whether you don't. But I want to make sure that demos, when we do them, are effective. So I want to start out by first kind of painting the scene. You can stop me if this sounds familiar. But maybe every 2 weeks, you do a demo for your users and you show up at the predetermined time. Maybe about a third of the people that you invited actually show up. One of the developers on your team, or perhaps the BA, if you have one, will pull it up on a big screen, pull up the app on a big screen that everyone can see. They'll say this sprint or in the past 2 weeks or whatever the increment is, we got the following things done and I want to show them to you, and you go through them and you show them all the features. That individual walks through them. Everybody just kind of sits there, maybe occasionally nodding their head, maybe asking a question. Probably somewhere in there is a feature that you thought was working, but for some reason it isn't anymore. And so you get an error message and you kind of chuckle and you say, oh, well, that was working on my machine, ha ha ha, and then you sort of sweep that under the rug and hope the dark angel of demos does not visit you again in a more catastrophic way. And then you get to the end of this and you've shown them everything and everyone just kind of nods their heads and says, yeah, that looks good, thanks. And depending on what kind of organization you work for, you might even have someone sign a piece of paper. Does this constitute the things that we delivered? And then you sign off on it. I would argue that if your demo looks a lot like what I just said, you are probably not getting a lot of the value out of demos that you could. I don't know that I would go so far and say that that's a demo that doesn't work, but I will say you're leaving a lot of value on the table. And so in today's podcast, I want to talk about ways that we can look at the demo and use the demo that will really unlock the power and the value of that practice. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what is the purpose of a demo? And there are going to be people who probably disagree with me on this, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the purpose of a demo is not to get sign off on what you did. The purpose of a demo is not to show to other people that your team has been doing valuable work. I'm going to say that in my experience, the real value of a demo, the real purpose of a demo, is to gather requirements. I think of the demo as a requirements gathering meeting. I tell a lot of our teams around here, the real requirements for a project usually don't come out until the demo. Why do I say that? Because when you think about when you were originally gathering requirements for whatever it is you're building, whether you're doing it in an incremental manner or whether, you got the requirements at some point in the past, you're asking your potential users to think about the application before they have seen anything. They're thinking about it in the abstract. They're trying to remember what form fields they need or what fields are required. They're trying to remember their business rules. They're trying to think about their jobs and how software might fit into that. And they're trying to do all of this in their heads. They have some concept in their heads of how this is going to go that's probably pretty ambiguous because they're putting it together in their heads, right? Or if they've used software before, is very constrained by the image they have in their head with that software. So if you can imagine these different users, stakeholders, etc., talking to you about what the software needs to do, and they haven't seen anything yet, but they're just trying to imagine it in their heads. What do you think the odds are that they're going to nail it? Probably pretty low, right? Like even your most on-the-ball users, the ones that really know the business inside and out, you start asking those requirements questions, you start asking them about what they want, what they need, how it's supposed to operate. The odds are pretty good that even your really good users are going to forget things, or they're going to get things wrong, or they're going to think they want things to be one way. But then when they see something or when they see it, now all of a sudden they have a very different opinion. about what they want. In software development, traditionally, we've considered that a failure, right? Where we spend time really getting good requirements, asking good questions, really ferreting out all these issues, making sure we got all the right people in the room. And then we build it, and all of a sudden they see things that aren't right. Oh, we forgot these fields, or actually, now that I see it, this is way too many fields. We need to figure out a way to reduce them. Or I don't want that on this part of the screen. I want that on that part of the screen. Or, oh, here's a whole segment of our customer base that I forgot. This is not going to be usable for them. We got to deal with them in a completely different way. When those happen, we think of those as failures, right? Like we should have asked more questions, or we should have asked the right questions, or we should have written more of this down, or we should have spent longer trying to arrive at a design before we showed them something. I'm just going to tell you flat out, you're never going to requirements engineer your way out of this. Whenever a user has to come up with these things without seeing something, it's gonna be wrong. They're gonna forget stuff. They're going to overlook things, and they're gonna come up with decisions that upon being confronted with them, they will change their mind. This is not a failure. This is the path you have to walk. This is what an Agile project looks like. And so we as developers, as people who provide the software, we have to have a mindset shift of our own. We have to think about these demos as a time when we are going to put something in front of people. Almost, I hate to use this, but it's almost like a decoy. Like we're going to put this in front of people like a prototype, like it's not even the real thing, but it's going to give them something to look at. And once they see it, and once they see how it operates, they're going to start coming up with all kinds of changes. Oh, we forgot this. Oh, we forgot that. Oh, I don't like the way that looks. I actually think this would work better over here. Now that I see that, I'm not sure it needs to be that way. Oh, here's a whole segment I completely forgot. Those things are going to come up as they see it. This is a success. Every single one of those, oh, we forgot this, or now that I see it, I think ... is a stepping stone to building the best software you could possibly build. We are getting closer and closer to what the users actually need. It doesn't matter what they said they needed 3 weeks ago or what they said 6 months ago. It doesn't matter what requirements document they signed off on 3 months ago. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is that they get software that they love, that makes them awesome. And those kinds of comments that they give you are the key. They're the stepping stones that you need to walk on to get there. In fact, when I do demos, whenever I invite people, I explicitly state this to them as the purpose of the demo. We're going to have this demo, and what I need for you to do is look at what we did and tell me all the things that need to be different. Because you're going to think of things that we missed, or you're going to think about things that you would like to see differently now that you've seen this. That is 100% going to happen. We need that information so that we can build the thing that you actually need. I make sure they know that so that my participants go into this demo knowing that what I want from them is a critique. What I want from them is a laundry list of things that are not quite right. I love that. That is a victory for me. That is gold. Because I can walk out of that demo knowing that I can then respond and adapt to that feedback and get them closer to what it is they actually want or need. If I have a demo and all I get from the spectators is, yeah, that's what we expected. That looks good. Thanks. I am very creeped out by that. Really? Really? We didn't miss anything? Everything looks exactly the way that you want it to? We aced that the first time? That's amazing, right? Now, for projects maybe that have been in progress a long time, that may be a more realistic outcome, but especially at the beginning, I really want that feedback to happen. And that feedback, those additional requirements, those changes in requirements, those are a victory. The whole point of Agile is that we can adapt to changing requirements even late in development. And so I want that. The second thing that I would throw out there for you to consider is to have the users themselves actually do the demo. I think the best experience you can have in a demo is to pull up the app and then have one of the users themselves try to do the functionality that you said you completed. Say, hey, this week we finished the ability for you to generate a quote. Why don't you go ahead and give it a shot and have them try to do it? Because you will get feedback from watching them that you might not get from them talking to you. Watch what happens. Can they figure it out right away? Is it super easy? Do they do it and they're done in a matter of seconds? Or do they struggle? Do they go poking around trying to find the menu item that does it? Are they having trouble finding the icon? Do they fill out the form differently than you would have expected? Do they take a route through your UI that you didn't expect? This is all great feedback that they probably wouldn't think to tell you verbally, but you can watch as the user actually behaves in your system, and you can adapt to that feedback as well. You can go, wow, they couldn't actually figure out how to do this. Like, I had to walk them through every little thing before we got it done. That's your cue that the UI UX might not be as good as it could be. I often say that one of the perils of being a software developer is that we tend to design software the way a software developer would use it. We design forms and we design user interfaces and we design workflows in ways that would make sense to a software developer as if I were the one using the software. But I'm not, am I? The only thing that really matters is how will the users use the software? Even if they use it in a way that makes no sense to me, that doesn't matter because I'm not the one that has to use it, right? And by watching the way they want to get things done, as opposed to the way I have carved out for them to get it done, that's very, very valuable information. Again, it's information that they wouldn't necessarily think to tell me verbally. If I show them, if I log onto the system and I walk through what I built and show them what I did, they probably will sit there and go, yeah, that looks pretty good. Yeah, that looked pretty easy. Yeah, you got that done pretty fast. Cool. Can't wait to use it. But if I drop it in front of them and have them use it, all of a sudden I'm going to get a whole new world of information. So if you can swing it, and I understand you can't always, but if you can swing it, I highly recommend arranging your demos so that your actual users try to do your features in the demo, as opposed to you doing kind of a guided tour through what you built and they just kind of sit passively watching your screen. The third thing that I would recommend is that you do demos often. If you're Scrum people, you don't have to wait for a sprint review to do a demo. Do a demo every other day if you can. Sprint reviews are something you do at the end of the sprint, and there's a lot that goes into them. A demo is often part of it because you do need to inspect the product increment that you built, but you also have to do a lot of other things. It's basically a product strategy meeting. What kind of feedback have we gotten? What things have changed in the market since we began these assumptions? How does this product increment change the way we think about the product? And then you're planning out the next increment of your product. So the sprint review is a product strategy meeting. You don't have to wait till then to show people stuff. You can show people stuff before it's done. You can show people stuff when it's just in the wireframe stage. You can show people stuff whenever you want. And I recommend that you do it as often as you can in a way that still makes sense and is obviously respectful of their time. I remember one of the first applications I built as a consultant, and I had somebody from that department in my cubicle almost every other day. Does this screen look right? I'm putting this over here in this panel. Is that about where you wanted it? Just having that ongoing process of feedback and validation. And when we did our first release, we made bank history because not only did we have 0 bugs, we had 0 requested user changes. That same bank for all their other releases averaged 60 between those two numbers. And we had 0 on our very first one. Why was that? Because I had someone in my cubicle almost every other day looking at the product and telling me if they thought I was on the right track or not. Now, I'm not saying you have to do a demo every other day. I'm not even saying a full-blown demo, every other day is even realistic necessarily. Of course, you have to be respectful of people's time, et cetera, et cetera. But what I am saying is that you want your demos to happen as often as you can realistically get them done, because the more often you do a demo, the shorter and shorter the feedback loop becomes. The shorter and shorter the time period is that you build without validation, that you build without verification. We want that amount to be as slow as we can get them. That's a principle that applies to just about everything we do in software. That's why we write unit tests. That's why we write integration tests. We don't want to build out very much without some degree of validation, without some degree of verification that what we're building is the right thing. So the more we can demo, then the more often we can get that validation, and we don't end up building out a whole bunch of features only to decide that the users don't like it or that we've done it wrong. Maybe we've even invested pretty heavily in a UX that is not very good, but we're not going to know that if we only demo once a month, right? Or once every 3 months or something like that. Demo regularly, demo often, even in little tiny chunks. The other thing that this does is as we demo more regularly, is we keep surprises down, right? By the time the users get the software in their hands, I don't want them to be surprised. I want them to be very familiar with all the things that are in that release long before the release even hits. And so demos are a great way to do that. By the time we release our software, users have seen it probably multiple times and gotten their hands on it, gotten a chance to mess with it themselves. But ultimately, when we think about things like keeping surprises down, shortening the feedback loops, ultimately this comes down to something relational. Demos are a great way to build trust. If you look at your organization and you think there is not a lot of trust between IT and the business, or the software developers and the users, or whatever, if you think there are trust issues there, more frequent demos are a great way to begin to rebuild the trust. Why? Because first of all, your users see that you are doing valuable work. You're showing it to them all the time, right? So that trust is being built. And I find that if users have a high degree of confidence that we're actually building things, they become a lot less tense about things like deadlines because they can see, right? Every week they can see, okay, they've built more software. They've built more software. I can trust them. I can depend on them. The transparency is high. And okay, so maybe they miss a deadline by a few days. It's not a big deal because I can see that they're working. I can see that my software is evolving. But the other way this builds trust, and this can be a little more subtle, but it's very deep and it's very powerful, is that when users give us that feedback that we didn't get something right, and when they see that we want that from them, that we expect it from them, we solicit it from them, give us those changes, give us as many changes as you can think of, and they see some of those changes be prioritized in our backlog, and some of those changes start to work their way into the software, now all of a sudden their own role in the software changes. Now they're building the software with us. Now we're in the same boat together. Now IT and the business is doing this project together. We're all in the same boat, rowing the same direction, making money, or whatever your company's goal is, whatever your reason for existence is. We're all in the same boat doing that together now, all of a sudden, because they are seeing in short bursts of time that when they say, no, it doesn't need to be this way, it needs to be that way, and they see that change happen, now they are co-authors with us. And the degree of trust and cooperation and collaboration that begins to grow in an environment like that, you can't put a price on it, but it does happen. And it's an amazing transformation to watch these two groups that are historically uneasy with each other, maybe even antagonistic, all of a sudden become an actual team. So I hope these tips will help you out. Remember that the purpose of your demo is to gather better requirements. Okay, that's the main purpose. You want the changes. You want the feedback. That is a win. The user saying that things are not right, that's a win. That's a success. Second thing, try to have the users as actively involved in the demo as possible. If possible, have them be the ones to pilot your features in the demo. And if that can't happen, try to get them as actively involved as possible. If you have to drive, ask them what they think should be the thing that you should do. Try to make them active participants. And then finally, do the demos as often as you can, even if it's just getting someone to look at a screen to see if it's right or not. Always be showing what you're building to the people who are going to use it, and the power that that has, both in terms of practical value and cultural transformation. I'm telling you, it's amazingly powerful. It will really change the way that you guys build software together. Thanks everyone for listening to Agile Bites. Agile does sometimes bite, but we don't think it always has to. If you enjoyed what you heard today, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you happen to be using. And if you can, leave us a comment because we'd love to hear your feedback. What things would you like to hear about? What things did you hear that were valuable to you today? You can also head over to integrityinspired.com to sign up to our email list. But that's all for today, folks. We'll see you next time.